I asked you earlier if you'd be willing to share like some of the early DMs because I think it's like something that people are really interested in. Of like, hey, like why did Jack Butcher say yes? You know, because like a lot of people that have like a way bigger audience than you probably have tried to get him on, and he probably didn't say yes to a lot of them. You know, and so I want to dig into like what was different about your approach, and if you don't mind sharing, like what the exact DM looked like.
Yeah, so here's the email I wrote him, like the actual cold email. Cool. But this is
Nice.
the email from a while ago. He actually didn't respond to this email. He DM'd me on Twitter. I was just like, easy, this is easier to find because Twitter search is terrible. But as you can see, hey Jack, hope this email finds you well. You're enjoying your road trip. Excited to get on call to discuss the details. Now, what are some ways I could help? I talked with Rishi, who is a good friend now. We work together at OnDeck actually. Basically, some value props of like what I could immediately work on or do. So I think the biggest keys here is like one, I already knew him, right? We already This is past the podcast point of
Mm-hmm.
view. So like don't just go for an ask right after you like right from meeting them. If you have the chance, like try to be able to talk to them first or, get to know them first.
If anyone listening knows about you, it's probably from Twitter, I would guess, or from the fact that you kind of worked your way into, or I want to say finessed your way into an apprenticeship with Jack Butcher. But how did it, I want to go back and like see like how did this all start? When did you like start being inspired to like start creating your own personal brand and like and by the whole concept of like working for someone you look up to?
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of it was kind of by chance and opportunity. It was the senior year of high school when, for me, when COVID kind of happened. So for the latter half of the year, everyone was kind of at home and spending more time on the internet and stuff. So for me, like kind of got into more of following different people on Twitter. Discovered this guy at first called David Perel, who has this course on writing called Write a Passage, and I thought like I wasn't really doing anything for the rest of the summer, and it didn't really seem like a school course. It just felt like something that I could work on as like a side project, while like kind of we were all in quarantine. So going through that, one, it introduced me a lot more people on Twitter. A lot of the other people taking the course were pretty active there, and they would recommend people to look at. And it also inspired me to start a podcast at the time, just so that I could have more inputs from interviewing people to find out what I actually wanted to write about in the course. And so I think Jack was guest 10 or 11 or so, and after reaching out to him, after doing the call, I think he really just liked kind of some of the questions I've asked and pushed him. Because I always try to I know like it's pretty generic advice out there that, like a lot of podcasts are the same and it's like hard to differentiate. Everyone's just asking these like cookie cutter questions. And so for me, like the biggest like leverage thing I could do was like I didn't have the massive amounts of listenerships or followers at the time. I was still relatively young, so it's like there's not a lot of domain authority if you come on the podcast. So like
Mm-hmm.
really the only distinguishing factor was the fact that like my questions were interesting and tried to get at a deeper level of what they were actually trying to build and do. So after that, he actually sent me the two courses that he had, how to visualize value and build oneself twice, and was like, here's a code that you can access them for free. I want you to go through them and help me identify points where I can improve what you think of them. Would really just love your feedback. So I was like, that's like a really nice sign. Like, I'll definitely like stay in contact with it. I went through the course, sent him an email with some feedback, and then it kind of perfectly coincided with another session within Write a Passage that was going on at the time, where it was kind of all about how can you craft a cold email, and everyone was telling these stories about how they used cold email to like unlock something or
Mm-hmm.
like get the next step. And so for me, it was like I kind of looked at more of what Jack was doing. I was like, damn, some of this stuff is really cool, really interesting. Like maybe I should reach out to him and just kind of like you know see if there's opportunity there to work together. Crafted some stuff in terms of just like basic points where I thought like maybe I could help and step in, or things I had identified at the time that would be useful. So sent that away, and I know it wasn't like I guess like completely cold or out of the blue, but that one thing led to another, and yeah.
Nice, nice. And just to go back a little bit to the rite of passage stuff, what inspired you to take that?
Yeah, so like I said, at the same time, it was just like heard a lot of stuff about how writing was kind of both a good mechanism to like kind of clarify your thoughts,
Hmm.
and learn more. And so I thought like that rite of passage had really strong reviews from everyone that I talked to. David's someone that I look up to in terms of like how they've built kind of their brand and their kind of I guess like flywheel of creation, right? Where it's like the newsletter, the podcast, all these different things, leading into one another and leading to cool opportunities. And so by doing that, it's been just kind of like rite of passage just seemed like the easiest fit. It was just something that, promised to be kind of an accelerator for getting your stuff ready, kind of kickstarting, actually putting yourself out there. So
Word. And were you writing on Twitter already, like regularly, when you were reaching out to these guests, or?
yeah, I would say I was like posting a lot of like curation content. I was like summarizing people's ideas and doing some of
Hmm.
that stuff at first when I was still trying to find my feet of like what I actually want to talk about a lot or what I'm actually good at. So I was posting pretty regularly. I didn't have a big audience by any means, probably 2 to 3K at the time, and it was just like slowly cranking away at the podcast. 1 to 2 guests a week would post summaries of the podcast, as well as just like some of my own content and some curation content. So I was being really active at the time just because I wasn't doing as much with like school and other stuff. So yeah.
Nice. So I asked you earlier if you'd be willing to share like some of the early DMs, because I think it's like something that people are really interested in. Of like, hey, like what did that actual like why did Jack Butcher say yes? Because like a lot of people that have like a way bigger audience than you probably have tried to get him on, and he probably didn't say yes to a lot of them. And so like I want to dig into like what was different about your approach, and if you don't mind sharing, like what the exact DM looked like.
Yeah, so here's the email I wrote him, like the actual cold email. Cool. But this is
Nice.
the email from a while ago. He actually didn't respond to this email. He DM'd me on Twitter. It's just like easy. This is easier to find because Twitter search is terrible. But as you can see, hey Jack, hope this email finds you well. You're enjoying your road trip. Excited to get on call to discuss the details. Now, what are some ways I could help? I talked with Rishi, um, who is a good friend now. We work together at OnDeck actually, um, and basically here's basically some value props of like what I could immediately work on or do. So I think the biggest keys here is like one, I already knew him, right? We already this is past the podcast point of
Mm-hmm.
view. So like don't just go for an ask right after you like right from meeting them. If you have the chance, like try to be able to talk to them first or get to know them first. So it's like personal at the start. And then yeah, here's kind of like have a couple lists of like what projects you could work on. A lot of times you want to be proactive with what you're doing. I'll actually pull up something in a second with like actually we coded the I helped him do the Permissionless Apprentice course. And one
Word.
thing, he actually had a section in that where he kind of talked about his mindset of like why he decided to work with me and
So
like
just
what
real
that looks
quick,
like.
so that email wasn't like the first interaction you had
No,
with him, right? What
yeah,
was the
it's
what was
just
that
it's
first
just
Twitter DM like?
it's just like, hey Jack, do you want to like? It's just a pretty simple podcast outreach. It's pretty simple. It's just like, here's some of the past guests that I've had.
Mm-hmm.
Here's what I would love to cover with you, and 3 key points about like what specific things they wanted to go over, and then yeah, would you want to come on the podcast? It was really short, concise, probably like 4 or 5 sentences.
So I guess why do you think he said yes? Because like I mean I would imagine you have a little more insight on this now that you're working with him, but like I assume he says no to a lot of these requests, right? So
A
like
ton, yeah.
why did he say yes to you?
I think a couple things. One was at the time he was smaller and he was in the mode of he was promoting his products and wanted to talk about his products. So one, I think it's really important to identify like there's cycles when creators are like open to speaking. Like James Clear, when I reached out to them, he only has 2 weeks every year, 1 week in the spring and 1 week in the fall, where he does just like purely interviews, and the rest of the year he's just not open to any. So I'd say just be really mindful of like keeping tabs on some of these guests, and also like when you see them actively doing interviews, actively doing Twitter Spaces and stuff, then being more proactive there because you know they're open to it versus just like a ask out of the blue without any sort of context.
So do you think basically he believed you had the platform that could actually help him promote his product? Was that like a big reason?
I don't think it was a massive reason in terms of just like, I think he knew at the time the audience wasn't huge. It was more of like, I think he believed in me in terms of like the long term that would be a bigger thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
In the relationship, you mean?
In the relationship and also the podcast as well. The podcast grew a ton. Like at the time when I had him on, I didn't even tell him the number of listeners I was getting because it was probably like 1 to 200 an episode.
Yeah.
And now I think that episode's done over 4 to 5K. Probably one of the most popular ones. Yeah.
Gotcha.
I found the section. Yeah, so this is part of the async course that we did, but this is Jack writing himself. So he's like, I can't count the number of emails and DMs we have received from people asking to work at Visualize Value. Most of them even working to work for free, but 99% of them still put me to work. How can I help you? I don't know. Are you hiring? It depends. Can I be an intern? It depends. I can't answer any of these questions because I don't know what you're capable of. So another way, Brandon reached out early this year. Oh, so yeah, we actually found the
nice.
The DM here. So I would love to have you on my podcast in the future. I interview different creators and entrepreneurs on producing content online, their creative process, and their mindset. I met David Perel through Reddit Passage and discovered your account through that. He's coming on the podcast soon, and I'd love to have episodes from you guys back to back. So what he says worked for him is it gives a brief overview of the topic, makes it sound like it's his audience, establishes credibility by mentioning David Perel, because I knew they knew each other. A few weeks after our podcast, this came from Brandon, so the email I just shared, it's abundantly clear that he knows the brand, he's done his homework, and took some time to prepare. He has tangible suggestions for how to make an impact. He leveraged someone else's experience to sell me on the value he'd bring. So that's kind of why the part where I mentioned Rishi and just like the fact that it works makes sense. So would hiring Brandon make my life easier? Yes. Did I do that? Yes. So yeah, that's pretty much his argument, I guess.
Is that public or is that like in a course?
It's in a course.
Okay,
so, yeah.
cool. Is that in the permissionless, what's the name of the course?
Yeah, Permissionless Apprentice.
Nice. Yeah, so I'll share a link to that if anyone's interested. Mm-hmm. So, just curious. So, you reach out, get him on the podcast. He's impressed by the questions. He sends you his courses for you to give feedback. You probably give like really great feedback on it, like super in depth and like valuable stuff. From there, is that when you directly follow up with that email? Or is there like interactions in between? Like, did he suggest like, oh, it might be cool for you to work for me?
No, not at all. I think the biggest thing was just, it was probably a week or two. I wasn't even thinking about reaching out to him at all. It was literally the Rite of Passage module on cold emails and hearing all the other people say like, oh, this works, right? Like you could get new opportunities. Like just literally think about like what could happen and what could come up and what that could lead to, and do it yourself. And so that's what finally made me realize like, okay, I should probably reach out. Like that'd be really cool. And this might actually turn into something.
Hell yeah, man. Kudos on that, man. It worked out. Can you talk more about, like we were talking earlier before we started recording about just like the topic of like permissionless apprentice, which Jack Butcher coined, and it seems like you've helped him kind of like build the brand almost around that like catchphrase. Can you talk about like the concept and like what it means to you guys and how people can leverage it?
Yeah, I don't want to take too much credit at all. I think it was the coinage and the expiration of the terms was mainly Jack, and I think it was from a conversation that he had with Matthew Kobach, so it was kind of the two of them at the time just jamming on this idea of like, I think the core idea is just that you're under promising and over delivering. Well, you're not promising anything because you're not reaching out to them at all. You're just showing up and doing the work, right? It's like basically going back to the concept of showing, not telling. I think that's what makes it impressive for people because you're kind of breaking from the norm, whereas typically if you're applying for a job, you wait for a job listing to be made, you wait for a place to put in your resume, put in your kind of cover letter, and hope for the best alongside a pile of 79 others. Where if you're being permissionless about it, you can, create roles by proving yourself, creating roles that are kind of tailored to you, so it's suited for you in the long term. And I think another really powerful thing is like in the process of doing it, right? Being permissionless and pretending that you're working for them, you can see if you actually want the job in the first place. Like there's an amazing story by Traff in an office hours that we held with the Visualize Valley community, where he kind of talks about when he was freelancing, when he was working as a web designer, he wanted to work for a crypto wallet company, and as an act to get hired, he redid their website completely. Obviously, they accepted it. They still use the website today, but for him, in the process of building that website, he realized like this is actually not really what I want to be doing. Like the company for him wasn't the perfect fit, so he actually saved himself a year of like signing into that company, getting on a contract and leaving on bad terms by in his own sense doing a bit of due diligence by working on the project himself.
Yeah, it's a cheat code. It's like, I mean, number one, I'm like 26 and I've never submitted like a resume, which is like freaking crazy. But like for me, it's like why would you compete with like hundreds, if not thousands, of people applying for like a really coveted position when you can create your own position, like you can create your own dream job, and like not compete against anyone, you know? And then the other thing of like being able to try something out, like that's the beauty of like working for someone for free in the beginning of like, hey, like you're helping out. There's nothing for the other party or the potential mentor to lose, right? Because like you're adding value to them. And on the flip side, like you don't feel like you're locked in because it's like, hey, like I'm doing this for free. Like there's nothing for the person to lose. Like I haven't committed to anything, and so it's like a great way to like try it out.
Definitely.
Yeah, man. That's cool. Thanks for sharing that. With Jack, what has it been like? You started during COVID, right? You started about it was like a year ago you started working with him.
Yeah, probably longer. And we worked really intensely together, I would say for around 6 or 7 months. Did a lot of stuff around, brainstorming just like new items to go to, like thinking about what does the email marketing stack look like, doing the permissionless apprentice stuff, writing the community newsletter, seeing how to optimize the community and stuff like that. And then kind of early 20 to early this year, Jack had a kid. So there was a time period where we took some time off, and then I, you know, started working at OnDeck and stuff. So it's turned to be a very, very part-time role at VV, where it's just like some community stuff, some content stuff for him. But yeah, Jack's always been, a great mentor in terms of being someone I could speak to about whatever next step I wanted to take, someone I could speak to about, when I'm building MakerSmart with Audit now. He was one of the first people I consulted in terms of like, is this an interesting idea? Like, what's the next what are some of the things we should think about? And yeah, it's just been a great mentor to have. Now I would say it's less of a apprentice model now, where it's like I've taken some a couple steps back just because like I haven't been able to give him the time,
Hmm.
and he's working on a lot of stuff in different um, realms now, where it's like a lot of crypto Web3 NFT stuff, which I'm still trying to learn myself, so I haven't been able to assist in the best capacity there, just because it's not my forte, so to speak.
For sure. I think the cool thing is that it's so flexible, right? Of like, hey, like some stuff you can help, some stuff it's not, but it's like whenever there is something you can add value to, you do. I want to go into the on deck and the maker mark stuff a little later, but first, can we dive just a little deeper into some of the projects you've done? Because I think a lot of people listening are kind of are curious of like what does like an apprenticeship actually look like? Of like you start off, you didn't have, I mean, you didn't have that much like marketing experience besides like doing your own social stuff, right? And like
Right.
how did it start and like how did it build up and like what are the pillar projects you worked on? Like what was it like learning like from scratch, like not having that much experience, like starting to work on those projects?
Yeah, so I would say it pretty much started like both of us were trying to figure out like what's the best thing. So pretty much like our model is we used to do like a weekly call and just kind of brainstorm ideas on how to best optimize for different things. And first, when it started, the core pillar thing that I started doing and have been doing is basically writing the community newsletter which is weekly, bi-weekly now, but it's curating a lot of the big wins in the VV community. Let's say
Mm-hmm.
someone's launched an NFT project or someone's, like shared this piece of content that I produced, and writing some in-depth breakdowns, just summarizing what's happening in the community every week. So I've done that for, I think we're on like the 48th edition now, which I guess shows like how long we've been working together.
Nice.
Um, so that's kind of something just like we consistently did since the start. And
And did you
some other
start
pillar
that, or
thing.
was he doing that himself before?
No, we kickstarted that off when I came on, yeah.
Nice.
And then there was a ton of experiments in the middle as well. We thought about like doing more stuff on YouTube, so we like brought on video freelancers and stepped up the cadence of the Q&As with the different guests that we had in the community, and figuring out which parts would be gated, which parts would be shared on YouTube, and what that would look like for YouTube. So we experimented with that for a month or two, realized that it didn't really align. It wasn't growing super fast on YouTube, and it was probably just better to not have it recorded and just have it available for the community. At the same time, I was also doing roundups of those Q&As, like summaries from extracting the best points that the speaker made for the people that were in the community but couldn't make the live session. So that a lot of like community centric, content centric projects at the start, and then kind of went into depth. Specifically, I'd say the biggest project was doing Permissionless Apprentice, gathering up a lot of the case studies, having Jack just do like background research, brainstorming for topics, flows, what the curriculum would look like. And there's a couple other projects. I don't know if I'm able to talk about as in depth, but yeah.
Because they haven't come up yet. Is
No,
that?
not that they come up yet, but also just like in terms of like other confidential reasons, or just like don't want to get too much into the back end of like what that entire operation looks like. And
For sure, for
yeah.
sure. What was it like building up the course? Because you didn't have any course experience, right? And it's a topic you're really passionate about as well. And so, what was that like? And what are some things you can share around that?
It's really interesting because at the end of the day, it's a lot of it is kind of coming from your perspective, and you're going to be blinded by like the content you keep on seeing daily. So for me, like when it was about gathering case studies of other people doing permissionless stuff, I really had to push myself into thinking like, okay, outside of this, just the sphere of like, applying for jobs, applying for apprenticeships, like what other like real applications are there? And
Hmm.
so I think for me, that was a lot of like, it was actually a lot about like the research and the journey of finding stuff, which I thought was really interesting because I thought course was all about like synthesizing information, but I kind of enjoyed the part where we were like looking for different case studies on the internet, and looking for opportunities there.
Nice. Now that you're launching your own course, like, are there any like main lessons you learned from that experience of like launching a course with Jack at that scale?
Yeah, I would say it's they're pretty inherently different. I think Permissionless Apprentice is more of like an additive niche course.
Hmm.
It's async. It's pretty like quick to go through. It's the value prop is mainly to show you that this mental model exists, and the different scenarios that you could use it. Whereas Maker's Mark, it's cohort based. It's live. It took a lot of planning with audit and practicing, doing dry runs, thinking through like the community aspect of it. But I'm definitely really grateful, like at least the curriculum side. I had to go with Jack, and learned how he and Celia thought about it, and I was mainly just like brainstorming stuff, but they really refined, created, curated, polished up, did a lot of the heavy lifting for bringing Permissionless Apprentice to like market. Like at the end of the day, it's like his idea, so
Yeah.
just being able to give him some of the raw material and seeing how he kind of carved into it and added just so much more value in terms of like structuring it was really helpful for me when it came to create something like in my vision, like trying to replicate like how he was able to make sure everything flowed and everything on the curriculum side was really helpful.
Yeah, no, I can imagine, man. It seems like you're kind of like a research assistant in a way, you know? Like there's
Yeah,
people like Ryan Holiday like help like Robert Greene like research his books. It seems like you're doing sort of similar stuff for like a course type like content.
definitely. Yeah, I think that's a cool model as well. Like, I think a lot of people, starting courses and stuff would be really appreciative of that because it's difficult to, crack the code of like what people want to see and how to best deliver the value to them.
Yeah, for sure. So overall with Jack, like working with Jack for over a year now, what have been the biggest lessons for you? Either just through like the work you've done and the things you've learned that way, or just through him and his mentorship and advice and like any questions you had for him and his answers.
I mean, I think it's mainly just watching him operate. I think
Mm-hmm.
he's very, very diligent about his online like presence. He's very, very strict about like, okay, this is something we should do, this is something we shouldn't do. And that really inspired me to like, give more thought into like what I was sharing, what I was like creating. And I think the biggest thing for him is he loves whatever he's doing. Like he's at a stage where he's built up, a sustainable source of kind of what he was doing.
Mm-hmm.
That now he's able to spend a lot of time just like exploring new spaces, evaluating new projects, evangelizing new things. So I think like one like that lifestyle, like showing me that that's like possible, that's like an option is really cool. But also, like I said, he's so efficient, so clear on his thinking, and I think that's what people appreciate about his account, right? It's really all about clarity. He's able to break down a lot of these complex topics in the space of like crypto and NFT stuff now, but he's always been able to do that. And I think a big reason why is he's just really, really strict and single-minded in terms of, understanding this is what I want to be sharing in the future. This is what I want people to perceive my general content as. So that's something I think I really took away from him.
It almost feels like an applied section of the course, you know? Like I totally agree with you of like working with people you look up to where it's like the experience is really being around them and just like almost subconsciously like integrating some things and the way they work and stuff that you don't really realize in the moment. But after you're like, holy shit, like I kind of like operate in a similar way just because like I've been around that so much, right? So in a way, it's like there's the visualized value course, right? And it's almost like you doing the apprenticeship is like an applied version of that of like, oh, like let me see this in action like again and again and it's like really integrated, right?
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
So it seems like your podcast is kind of like your resume in a way, like your it's kind of like your LinkedIn because you got this first opportunity with Jack, but then a couple months later, or maybe close to a year later, you interviewed Eric Thornburg, and he ended up turning like the interview for the podcast into like a semi like job interview, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah, a little bit. It was I think a couple weeks prior to that interview, I love his Substack. He has amazing Substack. Really
Hmm.
recommend everyone to read it. It's pretty
And just for
ranging,
people
but
listening who don't know, Eric, he's the founder of OnDeck, which is like this really cool.
yeah,
Um,
founder of OnDeck. He was early employee at Product Hunt. Also, I think one of the co-founders of Village Global, which is a big venture capital fund. But Eric's an amazing guy. I think it kind of turned into an interview. I had a question for him based on one of his early Substack posts on his frameworks for hiring, and I thought one of his mindsets was really cool. So I kind of asked him about it, like how has that turned out, and he kind of just used that. He flipped it, and he was like, let's just use this as an example. Like obviously, it's like just to illustrate the framework and put it into practice, but also like this could, potentially be something that we can explore working together, stuff like that. And then we chatted a bit more like after the recording finished, sent introed me to his like head of recruiting, head of growth, and then yeah, went from there.
and what were the next steps? I mean, how did it go
Yeah, yeah,
from just like interviewing the founder to like landing, I think the first position as like social media marketer there, right?
yeah. I mean, I knew so many people at OnDeck at the
Mm-hmm.
time already. Rishi, who featured in the Jack email, he was chief of staff actually at OnDeck at the time, so he's a close friend and spoke with him a bit about what it was like being there. KP, a couple other guys. were already there at various positions within the org. So like kind of got spoke with each of them about like obviously what they're building, understanding what they're building, because it is a really complex space, like what they're building in, how fast they were growing at the time. Like really, they were really looking for like they had found product market fit and were really trying to hyperscale in that mold. So it was like really important for me to get an understanding of what they were building, to be able to then in the interviews with the head of recruiting and the head of growth talk about like where I would best fit in. So I would say right after finishing the call with Eric, I spent 2 weeks or so talking to different people that were at OnDeck or went through OnDeck programs, and then I had my first calls. And then it was really quick after that. They gave me an offer, and at the time it was a full-time offer, but as I was a student, we kind of renegotiated, so it'd be part-time for when I was in school, and then full-time for 4 months over the summer. So yeah, really thankful for the opportunity. Amazing team, evolved so much. Like when I was first joining, they hadn't even raised their Series A. During the middle, raised the massive Series A, and I think they're really gonna be building such a cool fit. They're just building something new. It's not like a model. It's not like an Uber for X. It's not like a Airbnb for X. It's a very new space, I feel like.
Can you break it down for people that don't know OnDeck at all?
Yeah, so OnDeck, I think the best way to describe it as it's just a location for ambitious people to, accelerate their careers, and it does it in a couple ways. I think of it in a couple main stacks, where there's the founder stack, where if you're looking to start, build, or scale a new company, there's different fellowships for that. And the core, I guess, like unit of OnDeck, right? The core business unit of OnDeck are different fellowships, which are lifelong communities that you join, and you pay a yearly membership. And the idea is that, one, it's an insanely highly curated network of peers, but also you get live speaker sessions, you get access to different marketplaces that the team is building, where you can find your next advisor, find your next couple of employees, find your potential co-founder within all these different programs. So the core programs, like the founders program, right? That's where a lot of the companies coming out of OnDeck. That's why some people comparing it to like in some way like look like an accelerator, where it's like spinning out all these different companies.
Yeah.
But they're also building a lot more on top of that, where it's like there's also like the Angels program, where you can like if you're founding a company, you can then go to the Angels program to find angel investors. There's also the First 50 program, where if you're starting an early company looking for early employees, you go to the First 50 program to hire your first 50 employees.
And I know they have like career tracks as well, right? Like
Yeah,
they'll have like
that's like the second main, I guess, like big bucket, where it's like there's the founders bucket and then there's the careers bucket, where it's like I think right now they have like 6 or 7 different programs, but there's just so many different career tracks that you could explore and build out to, that I think that's going to be massive as well. It's mainly for giving people at the same roles in different companies a place where they can talk about the problems that they're facing in the role, how they can up level within the role, different things like that. I think they have chief of staff one, product manager, community builder, customer success. Might be missing one more, but that's kind of like the main ones that they have up now. But there's just gonna be so many more ways to help different professionals up level.
I feel like I need to source some guests in like the chief of staff track and probably a couple others. It's probably
Definitely,
cool.
definitely. Chief of staff, and they have Catalyst as well, which I think is cool. Catalyst is like for some of the younger folks that are still doing some amazing things. I think 3 people from the first Catalyst cohort just launched like Utopia Labs, which is something to do with like DAO communities. I think they just featured in TechCrunch literally 2 to 3 days ago, but
Oh, interesting.
cool stuff that they're doing. Yeah.
Yeah, I heard a really good definition of OnDeck, which is like maybe not a definition, but like a way to refer to it, which is like Stanford like unbundled or something like that. Does that
Yeah.
click a bell?
Yeah, I think like in a lot of the marketing material, I've just seen like so much of that stuff just from like doing a lot of the projects there in terms of trying to break it down and communicate what it is. Stanford for the internet was the analogy they like to use. Just the idea that Stanford, the reason it worked so well was like it's obviously its proximity to Sandhill Road, like the amount of talent, right, the high bar that attracted that talent as well, and the serendipitous connections that just kind of happened within it. So to gather the talent, obviously the finances, right, the investors, and the opportunity and ideas all in the same place, but on the scale of the internet. I guess that's kind of why they like that analogy.
Yeah, man, I'm excited for you and the journey you're on with this I mean, it's gonna blow up in the next couple of years, so it's probably exciting to be part of that journey.
Hmm.
So you specifically, you're doing social media, right? You joined like this summer, like July or something like that, right? Or was it earlier?
Like I said, when I started, it was just part time. So
Mm-hmm.
that was mainly when I was just purely doing social media content, helping them announce their new cohorts, helping them structure and highlight wins of their past cohorts. But going full time, I also went pretty deep on other marketing projects in terms of like how do you get the content operation up and going, how do you get the case studies up and going, how do you get like just more long form content up and going. So did a lot
Interesting.
of that as well.
So you're
Um,
helping like with the blog as well and the newsletters right now, or what's the full scope of like what you're doing?
Yeah, so actually, I'm not at OnDeck anymore because I, came back to school, took some time off
I see.
this year. But for the all of summer, it was mainly working on, yeah, getting the case studies operation up and going. So,
Yeah, for
so
sure. That's wild. So it was kind of like an internship, except it was a full-time position for like a couple months.
it was definitely a full time position. It was really intense. Got to work with a lot of different people, do a lot of different projects.
They knew going in like we're only committing for the summer, so it was like a full-time position for the summer, or
Obviously, like they wanted me to stay on for longer. Like they gave me the offer for longer. It was just like, for me at least, it's my first year of college, so I didn't want to not commit without having spent more time like seeing what it was about and stuff as well,
yeah,
and just wanted to like test the waters with the team for the 4 months as well. So yeah, they knew going in that that was
that was
the
the deal.
the plan. Yeah.
Nice. And so right now you're back in school. It's your sophomore year, right? What are you
Yep.
studying?
I haven't declared yet. I'm thinking between history or econ at the moment. Yeah.
Nice. Why those?
History I've just always liked. It's been my favorite. All the advice has always been from everyone, study what you enjoy and spend the rest of the time like and then spend your free time, working on what you actually want to do, which is, startups and marketing and stuff in that space. Yeah, so and econ is just something that's always been pretty natural for me to do and work through.
Right. Yeah, those sound like solid choices. Sophomore year now, you're not working with OnDeck anymore. You mentioned like the Jack Busher like Visualize Value Apprenticeship is kind of like on the lowdown right now just because he just got a kid and working on other projects in crypto. What's your plan for this year? Are you planning going like full-time student, like doing some stuff for your personal brand and not really taking on anything else, or
Yeah, I mean, there's been offers to do some other work on the
I'm sure.
side, do some freelance stuff. We just actually finished our first cohort of Maker's Mark, which was around 3 weeks long, but that was kind of very intense for a while as well for my first month back. So very much still like working on stuff on the side. I think you have maybe spinning up an agency to do some creative work or marketing work with different founders as well. But Maker's Mark has been pretty awesome to work on and just yeah.
Can you tell the audience like a little more about it? I know it's like when is it launching?
So we launched, so we finished our first cohort
You
already.
did. Okay,
So
cool.
yeah, we launched a while back, end of summer, August or so. We got over 300 applications or so. Ended up taking 50 or so. We wanted to keep the first cohort relatively small, just so because we didn't really know like if we were doing everything perfectly or correctly at the start. But I guess to zoom out, give a bit more context around what it is, why we decided to do it. So it's a program that I co-started with Audit Chet, who's another kid on Twitter who's around the same age as me. We kind of connected a while back, but he's just been growing like crazy on Twitter. He reached out a while back and he was like, I'm thinking about a cohort-based course, kind of talking about content creation and audience building. Would you want to like co-do it with me? I'm like, definitely, let's do it. And at the time, we wanted it to be cohort-based because that's kind of like what Rite of Passage was for me. He took a course called 10x Creator and he really liked it. So that model just made a lot of sense, right? It's live, so there's a lot of accountability baked in.
Yeah.
The communities are usually really strong, and we just had so much experience in those spaces, and we just kind of knew it worked. Like OnDeck, in a sense, it's not a cohort-based course; it's a live community. It's a little different than that, but there's aspects of it, mainly the community part, where if you nail it, like that's worth it in of itself. So we kind of started brainstorming about like how we might host it, how we might, go about creating it. What should we cover? What's our ideal persona? Did all that thinking, did all that brainstorming. Ultimately landed on hosting it on Maven, which is kind of a platform specifically built for hosting these type of live cohorts and events and stuff. And amazing set of investors.
Yeah.
I think they just recently raised their Series A as well. I actually worked with Gaga and Biani, one of the co-founders, for a while.
Oh, no way.
While kind of like I was on a small break with Jack and co. So I kind of just reached out and said, could we, host our course here? This is kind of what we're looking to cover. And he was super cooperative, connected us with the right people, got it set up super quickly, super smooth transition, really enjoying the platform. They're continuing to ship new features and, went from idea to launch in 2.5 or so months. I think we mainly put a lot of work in on the curriculum side, but wrapped up literally 2 to 3 days ago and prepared to launch another cohort in November with a bunch of new changes pending, bunch of new lessons and feedback incorporated. But it's been so fruitful to see a lot of people enjoying it, a ton of people, that were really happy with what we covered and, already like creating a lot more content than they did before.
Nice. And I don't think we've actually covered like what the course is actually about. So
Yeah.
just for people that are interested, what's the cohort course about?
Yeah, so the idea is around like making your mark as a content creator. Like a lot of people are just consuming or curating, reading, highlighting, but not actively engaging in making content. So we wanted to create a program that basically shares the best lessons from our journey and shows like what works in terms of how to leverage growth on a couple different platforms to be able to scale and grow either your personal brand or your different projects that you're working on. The crazy thing is we initially thought that this be something that was cool for a lot of people that wanted to, a lot of younger people like Audit and I.
Yeah.
But in the end, a lot of people that joined were pretty seasoned founders or people within the startup space, and they wanted to share what companies they were building and what they've learned after 15 years as a PM. And that was just a really nice realization that the audience is a lot bigger than kind of what we initially thought it was.
That's awesome. Yeah. It's cool that, what are you, 21, 22?
No, yeah, I'm 20.
You're 20. It's crazy that like, even though you're 20, you can build like an area of expertise like around, I mean, you've grown your social personally, right? And the podcast and newsletter. You've kind of like built your credibility around that. And then people that have years of experience, probably in other areas that you're interested in as well, right? Like product, like startups and stuff that are successful in their own way, like can learn from you as well, even at that,
Yeah.
even though you're that young.
It's really just about the slight frameworks and yeah, just getting over the mindset of like having age is a big factor there. Like, yeah, it's not like you're teaching them how to succeed in their own field. It's a kind of separate game for them. At first, we were a little surprised, during the applications and stuff, and when we were talking to all these people, like, would they be the right fit? Like, would the stuff we're teaching, carry over? But it worked out perfectly. Obviously, we adapted some of the stuff as well as, we kind of were accepting people and realizing, like, this is more of the stuff we should cover. But, yeah, really, really excited with the future of where that's going. Been really enjoying working with Audit. He's an amazing guy. And yeah, so many cool things that we're looking to iterate and build upon.
That's awesome, man. We can put a link in the description to the course, but if people just want to search for it, where should they go?
Makersmark.school. So like school.
Okay, awesome, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as far as your own like content journey, can you talk a little bit about that and also your advice you have for people that want to follow a similar journey of like building their personal brand, but also like the networking aspect of it?
Okay, but diving into kind of like the personal content creation journey and I guess advice. For me, I started initially just posting on Twitter, like I mentioned at the start of the conversation, like a lot of curating topics in a sense, right? Because, as I was 18 at the time probably. Um, I didn't have a lot of life experiences to share
Yeah.
that would probably have resonated with a lot of people on Twitter. So um,
And can you clarify what you mean by curating?
yeah, so I would look at let's say Pomp and David Perel's last webinar, summarize it into key points, and then post a big thread with it kind of organized it in a nice way, where the topics were grouped together or something like that.
It's almost
And
like shareable show notes, kind of, right?
yeah, kind of like that. Um, Either from live webinars that I might have attended, or past videos, past podcasts, past essays, and just doing a lot of curation on this is really valuable. This is my biggest takeaways, and people really enjoyed that. People like the breakdown. They don't have the time to walk through a video and look for key points. So kind of initially grew probably the first 2 to 3K from there, and then a lot of the consistent growth or the development or establishment of new audiences was just from consistently doing podcasts. At a point, I was doing 2 to 3 a week and publishing
Damn.
at least 2 a week, and yeah, the podcast grew very
Were,
quickly. I think I ended with like 50 or so episodes, 50,000 plus downloads.
were you growing from sharing summaries from that on Twitter and like from I'm guessing from like the big guests resharing on their social accounts, or what was the big driver of growth?
Yeah, a combination of that, and I think like a lot of times they like really enjoyed the interview, so they would actively be like, reaching out and saying like, when's this gonna be ready for me to share? Like, shoot me a link and I'll tweet about it. And in part, a lot of the growth was that, but at the same time, I was still being active, engaging with people, commenting a couple different times to a couple accounts just to get my face out there, profile out there. I think I grew, or like my account grew in less of the thread, I guess, like dominant era. I feel like now everyone's doing a lot of threads. If you're kind of on Twitter and active there, like there's a bunch of people that are just crushing it, growing specifically through threads.
Yeah.
I've written a couple, but that's kind of like not how I initially grew. So for me, in terms of the content advice space, I would say focus on right now, you got to play the game. You got to focus on the most effective tactic available, right? Like identify the meta. And so for Twitter, what that might be is writing threads, but for your platform of choice, finding what that is and digging deep and setting up systems so that you can do it consistently. That's been the biggest thing for me. Like, you're not going to win without being able to do it consistently. For the podcast, I don't know, I just had a nice rhythm of I was interviewing a guest, asking them for who I should speak to next, reaching out, just being proactive on a cycle where I was easily doing 2 a week, and it wasn't like a big drawback, and people just came to expect out of it and enjoyed the listen and everything.
Nice. And you're doing a newsletter on top of that as well at the time, right?
Yeah. Newsletters was mostly curation, stuff I was looking at, enjoying during the week, and inspired by kind of the rite of passage model where, what's the quote? Like, A plus consistently with B plus content is better, will always beat out A plus content with B plus consistency.
Mm-hmm. And so was the model kind of grow the audience on Twitter? Like, I always look at it like you have a platform that helps you grow, right? Which something like very shareable, like Twitter, and then it seems like newsletter is more kind of to like the audience you own and you have like direct relationship with, right? You can reach everyone every single time. Was that kind of like the model you're going for? Or?
Yeah, pretty much like Twitter's like the virality and I guess like existing content, and then the launch pad, and then the newsletter's like what you're trying to transfer everything to, because that's just like consistent.
And it seems like you stopped both the newsletter and the podcast, right? Like, what was the reason? I mean, I'm guessing it's because you were busy as fuck.
Yeah, pretty much. Also, at the time, I was thinking like, was I really enjoying doing the podcast? I didn't really have a specific niche for the podcast. I kind of just felt like I was reaching out to a lot of different guests, and I was hitting a point where I was like taking in all their advice but failing to take action,
Mm-hmm.
because I was just doing the podcast and talking the whole time. So I wanted to spend some time take a pause on creating and um, see what I could like do by putting myself to action.
Nice. Nice, man. And so I'm guessing the big focus for this year is the course.
Yeah, and I do want to get back into personal content creation. I think audits is someone like a business partner in a sense. Seeing him continue to pump out stuff and starting his own newsletter and see that take off, like that's been a big inspiration in a way for me to get back in the arena, so to speak.
For sure. Nice, man. Well, this was awesome. Thanks for sharing all the juicy details about the story and all the outreach and permissionless apprenticeship stuff. I'm guessing the best place right now for people to reach you or to follow you and follow what you're up to is Twitter, right?
Definitely, definitely. That's where I'll be. Even though I'm not posting as much, I'm still actively, browsing and responding to DMs and stuff. So
Nice. I'll put your handle in the description. I think it's at Brandon Hey Huang. Is that it? Can you spell that just for people that are lazy and don't want to check out the link in the
yeah, no
description?
worries. Yeah, BrandonThezhang.
Nice, man. And last question, in the next 10 years, I don't know if you have a vision that far, but like what's the big plan? What are your dreams and goals or
I think the two directions I'm thinking of is one, I've thought about this, I've talked about this with a couple of people. I think starting a product studio would be really cool. Something that, in a similar mold to what Greg Eisenberg has with what he's building,
hmm
just something where you can consistently build upon ideas. If one takes off, that becomes maybe a company, or you're just helping these companies build MVPs. That's a really cool model for me. I think you can employ a lot of different skills there, or else just start a company, either bootstrapped or VC, depending on what you want to build. That's kind of the two tracks I see myself.
Hell yeah, man. Exciting.
Yeah.
Actually, I lied. One more question that just popped up. Okay, I think it's probably something that a lot of people are wondering, but you've kind of embodied this permissionless apprenticeship path, right? But it seems like you're still finding value in like going the traditional like college path. So I'm curious
Mhm.
what your thinking around that is and like what the value of finishing like a bachelor's degree at I mean, it is a top tier school, right? You're probably, I
Right.
don't know if you have a scholarship or whatnot, but like probably does still cost some money and like I guess opportunity costs of like the time, right? So
Mhm.
what are your thoughts around that?
My mindset is I've talked with a bunch of people that dropped out. I've spoken to them, and a lot of them kind of, in some sense, wish they stayed. Not in the
Interesting.
sense of like the education aspect of it, but a lot of it is just, having the optionality to build stuff on the side without, the pressure of doing a bunch of stuff and like taking care of everything of yourself at the time, but also just like the people you're gonna meet. Um, and I think it's great to index really heavily on one space, but I think college just gives you access to people in a lot of different fields. I'm also here in New York, which is like you know just like something you can't really turn down in terms of access and everything. So it's twofold in a sense of really value the connections I'm getting to make and getting to see, and also just that extended optionality of being able to build alongside without the pressure of anything turning into anything or you know having to sustain anything or reach a certain goal.
That's a great way to put it, actually. It's like it's kind of an excuse or it's almost like putting 4 years away. It's not like a, it's like a gap period, right? Where you're like able
Yeah,
to, you did like some of these apprenticeships for free in the beginning, right? And I get you, yeah, you had the time which you could offer for free, which is like a huge advantage in some way versus like a lot of other people. So um,
right.
it's a great way to put it,
Yeah, it's a difficult topic. It's different for everyone based on your situation, what you want to do.
for sure.
Like for me, I feel like if I was 100% that I knew I want to do something, like maybe college wouldn't be the perfect thing, but I'm still in that, experimenting stage, connecting stage.
Yeah, yeah, it's good to take your time and figure those things out for sure.
Yeah, it's a big decision, man. Big decision.
There you have it. I hope you got something out of this interview. I'm really trying to make this as valuable as possible to you. So if you have any feedback on how I can make this better, or if you have any questions for me personally, I'll get back to you.
reach out to me on Instagram. My handle is @JeremyJohnMary. You can also comment if you're watching on YouTube. You can just comment below. All right, thanks for listening and have an epic week.